Good to have everyone here. Welcome to the Edge of Success Business Roundtable. And I'm delighted to have a number of guests today. And rather than me trying to introduce them, I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. So, Francie, we'll start with you, then Sarah, and then Ryan. And then I'll share a little bit at the end about myself as well. So, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Francie Jane. I'm the founder of Terawatt. Terawatt is a marketplace and an advisory firm for executive group coaching. Well, we follow the science, but the science tells us that the higher this level of psychological safety you have in an organization, the better the outcomes for the organization and also the client slash patients slash recipients of whatever the services are. And so right now we're spending a lot of time on government contracting with hospitals. Well, it's with the government, but on behalf of hospitals. And so we're trying to bring expert coaching for profit organizations. I think we have almost like 100 coaches around the country, and I'm agnostic about framework or how you get there, but the idea is just having different experts being able to help organizations improve processes and behaviors.
Sarah, go
Great.
ahead.
Well, good afternoon. I am Sarah Bordeaux. I am founder of Purposed HR. I equip employers to build thriving teams from compliance to culture. So that looks like HR infrastructure, culture infrastructure, and leadership training. Some of what Francie mentioned, I love and do more in a group workshop setting, if you will, as far as communication training with the DISC, how to build trust with your employees, giving feedback to your employees. So I do a lot on the leadership training side. Culture looks like a culture review, helping employers find their roadmap, how to integrate their mission, vision, and values with their survey their employees, exit interviews, stay interviews, and really help that all inform the process of a good culture process. And then HR infrastructure looks like strategy, process, and policy. So handbooks, onboarding plans, job descriptions, and all of the infrastructure that lays the accountability that the culture needs. HR and leadership all ties into the culture. So that's why it's called Purposed HR. And mid-market is really where I like to sit, where I can train leadership teams. I can help them stop turnover. I can help them boost morale and things like that.
Great. Well, thank you, Sarah, for joining us
Thank you.
today. All right, Ryan.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Ryan Dow, CEO of Reframe RIA. I'm the operational optimizer for financial advisors, and really it's twofold in the problems I solve. One is just the time and energy that is wasted on broken operations, administrative work, and technology that's not working for them, it's working against them. And the second is just from turning from reactive to proactive. And really all of this stems from my time as a project manager in the Air Force, my time as a product manager in software, and ultimately my time as a financial advisor. I really experienced these pain points myself and wanted to sit on the other side of the table to give time and energy back to the financial advisors to grow their business for better client services and ultimately just let them live the life that they want to. So if we start with the ideal client profile, how you differentiate yourself from advisors in a saturated market, and build out your annual service calendar to streamline your internal operations, but also coordinate your external marketing to really set yourself apart from other advisors in your network. The last stage is actually building those workflows into your CRM systems and your back-end processes. And at the end of our cohort and our work together, it's really about the refinement and building that foundation for you to elevate your game.
Great. That's a very interesting area. Glad to have you with us, Ryan. All right, Fran, share a little bit about you.
Hi, thank you. Hi, I'm Fran McNeil with Significant Business Results. I'm based in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, and I help architects, engineers, and construction business owners who want to grow, scale, or sell their businesses. And I solve the problem, and sometimes they don't think it's a problem, of business owners who are really using their business as a 24/7 job and helping them actually have their business run without them. I approach the advising from a holistic standpoint. I'm helping business owners look at increasing the value of their company, both from a financial standpoint in terms of, yes, more revenue, more profitability. Brian mentioned operations. So there are 8 key drivers that when businesses run their business as if an outsider were looking at the inside of their business actually is much stronger. And that work is based on a book by John Warlow called Built to Sell. So my competitive advantage is that I've spent years in the entrepreneurial education space, certainly in Philadelphia, but I was one of three people selected to go to New York under Mayor Bloomberg's administration so that folks in the New York City area could get free entrepreneurial training. And then I worked a year with the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program in New York and 11 years in Philadelphia. Through fairly rigorous training programs, worked with 886 small business owners who have generated 15,000 jobs and nearly 11 billion in revenue. So I love helping entrepreneurs I call be dangerous, focus their energy for action, and really step back and step away from their business so that their business can run without them, their leadership team can lead, their employees can serve their clients. Didn't grow up on a farm, but it makes for a better cash cow. And when they go to sell their business, it certainly increases the valuation.
Glad to have you, Fran. Fran and I overlap a little bit. She is more focused in
Yes.
specific areas, but the 8 metrics you talked about are the same ones I'll share with you here in just a moment. Dr. Dave Pennington, I founded and am the owner of Penn Coaching Consulting about 10 years ago now. My background is ministry originally, and then for quite a number of years, quite a bit in private education as a school administrator, head of school, executive director of a state group with 37 schools in it, president of a state group on a national board, so a lot in private education administration. And then I kind of took all of that into coaching. And then I've had a little bit of an iteration in my coaching practice. I started more in the leadership development space. I just found that inevitably when I talked to a leader and they had issues, it almost always came back to a leadership issue. And so I still do some of that where I lean in and help leaders become better leaders. Then I focused on scaling. A lot of times the people are frustrated because they're not growing, they're not scaling, and they don't understand why. And almost always it's usually because of the leader. You kind of get in your own way sometimes. And then about a year and a half ago or so, I shifted to more focusing on exit strategy for small to mid-sized business owners. And I'm kind of in that pre-sale space. I don't necessarily help with a transaction, but I position them so their valuation is high and so their sellability is attractive to buyers. And I'll say how messy it is sometimes to get them ready so that they really can be able to exit. And part of what I focus on is not only just selling the business, but preparing the owner. And so I focus on actually preparing the owner to sell as well as just selling the business. Fran mentioned the 8 metrics. There are 8 of them. Financial performance, that's the one we're going to focus on today. Monopoly control is how you differentiate yourself. A lot of times, and I think it was Ryan who was talking about helping people in the financial services business to be able to differentiate yourself and to stand out, if you would. Switzerland structure really has to do with your dependency. A lot of times we don't realize it. For example, you might be very dependent upon just one particular client. And sometimes that can be 50-60% of your income. And so trying to make sure that you don't have maybe one key employee or one supplier or one client who is just really taking most of your space, it can position you where it's risky for you and risky certainly for a buyer. Valuation teeter-totter, I like to think of it as cash flow. We have cash coming in, cash going out. It'd be nice if the cash came in at the right time, so when you got ready for it to go out, it would go out at the right time. But if you run a business, that's not always the way it works. Recurring revenue is pretty obvious, but where possible, some businesses are harder to have like a regular recurring revenue. Think of like a Netflix subscription that people subscribe to and you have steady cash coming in. If you can do that in your business, it certainly is very helpful and just makes life a lot less stressful. Growth potential is not only in terms of your growth ability, but the rate of growth that you can potentially grow. Those are things that buyers are looking for. Happiness is one that we often don't measure, but that's really important to measure just because if they're happy, they typically will come back for more services. In addition to that, they will recommend you, which is what you're wanting. And then the last one, hub and spoke, is the idea of how dependent your business is upon you. If you're not careful, you can carry the whole load of the business on your back. And as a result of that, your valuation really goes down. And frankly, your sellability goes down. And I'll back up to financial performance because really, when we think about financial performance, we have income coming in, we have expenses going out, we have net profitability, and then having a good set of books, which is part of what you're after, because a lot of times we really just don't have a good set of books. So I want to talk a little bit about that and then have you share some today, what has been your experiences and any insights that you might provide or maybe ways you've been able to work around them. I'm interested in just things you've done to hold your expenses down so that your profitability can be higher. Okay. When your income comes in, one of the ways I know that people have managed this is they take their profit out first. And then what it does is it forces them to live on what's left in terms of the operations or the expense. We usually do it the opposite way. We have money coming in, whatever our expenses are, and then whatever's left over, that's our profit. But sometimes what happens when you get to the end of the month or whatever, there's just not a lot left there if you really look at it honestly. And so that's something that we can discuss as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about the financial books and some things that we can do there. So let's just start. Anyone can jump in. Maybe I'll ask Francie if you don't mind sharing first just to get us going. What in your business, in your life, and as you work with clients, what's been your experiences in this whole financial performance area?
It's funny because my husband works in private equity, and so he loves to like give me a hard time about what I spend on my business. And so I actually went through this exercise maybe more like last year. And it turns out there are a lot of things that I subscribed to or did to make my life easier that were meant to be kind of like placeholders that I was holding on tight to, but for no other reason than just that they were there. And I think that spending a little bit of time just thinking about not if this is necessary, but do I have to pay for it? And I think that's actually fascinating to me, how quickly you realize that at least I was responding possibly to advertising as opposed to trying to find a workaround that didn't cost nearly as much. And there's so many examples of that. One thing I just recently did is I just very simplified my website. I had this sort of elaborate website that I thought was really important. And then the business model kind of changed. And now it's really just a landing page. And, that saved me several $100s a month from Amazon Web Services.
Out of curiosity, how many of you are probably subscribed to things that you really don't need? I'd put myself in that kind.
Yeah.
I'm doing the same thing where I'm kind of going through and thinking, all right, do I really need to, why did I get this to start with? And things change.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't recognize that we no longer need that service, but we're still paying for that service and it's affecting your bottom line.
And I think one of my big things is I would say, well, that's only $20 a month or $100 a month, but you feel like 20 of them or 30 of them, it really does start to add up. And that's the issue. You have to kind of see every dollar is sacred. It's almost like the perspective, I think, to adopt. And it's been fascinating,
All right. Anyone else want to jump in here?
My experience is almost the opposite. I started saying, I'm not going to spend any money. I don't need to spend any money. I am the product. I'm the expert. I don't need help. And then after a while, I was like, I'm spending too much time doing my books or doing this or doing that. And I need a coach. I need a bookkeeper. And I've just found a better quality of life by adding subscriptions and that I am more efficient and just happier. So it's very much the opposite.
There's a balance there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, knowing what you should keep and what you should farm out. And it probably differs for each of us because you want to keep things you're good at doing and you like doing. You want to farm out things that you really don't like doing, you're not so good at doing. And frankly, they just take a lot of time. So finding that balance is something, the idea of just being cost conscious. Fran, you have anything to add?
Sure. You mentioned expenses and profit first. I'd like to offer a third perspective that's still part of the business wheel, and that Stephen Covey often talks about begin with the end in mind. So on the balance sheet, yes, the bottom line is the profit, but I would say that the bigger picture is begin with your vision around what your business is all about, who are the clients you're serving, what's the lane where you're most competitive and the customers are happiest with. And then in doing that, really look at what are the resources necessary for you to be competitive. So as opposed to expenses, look at your resources. Usually the largest expense for any business is people. So if you build your business around the organization structure that will support your business, like legally, at least in America, the business is an entity. And a lot of times business owners think of their business as their baby. Your baby grows up, but we want to support the business. What does it need in order to serve your ideal customers? And when you do that, you then pick an org chart or develop an org chart that then allows you to have the best talent that you can afford, that gives you the optimal service that keeps the customers coming back. So that expense is around what the business needs. And I think you're keeping the vision in mind, the mission in mind. And I often like people to think about a GPS. When you say, I'm going to go somewhere, you identify the destination and your vision is your destination. But along the way, there's lots of choices. And so you're constantly figuring out, given economic pressures, given Sally's called off today, given you've lost a customer that was 20% of your business, whatever the traffic jams are mentally or financially, you're trying to figure the best way to stay true to your destination. And I think that impacts your profits and your expenses, but it's doing it from a more holistic perspective. And
Start picture.
it's around sanity. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It allows the business owner in a sneaky way to be more strategic because the focus is on sanity. Let's keep it simple. What is it that you're supposed to be doing? Why are you competitive? As opposed to trying to do so much because there's this opportunity or that opportunity. I do try to focus on helping people focus their energy, be calm, be strategic, because being an entrepreneur is tough.
The other challenge kind of connected with it is things do change. I mean, what you do at the beginning and the way you do it. And I think that's some of the challenge as well.
I think there's been so many connecting the dots moments here across what everyone said. And I think where I would start is, Dave, for your coaching in the business exit, I think it makes a lot of sense to have the financial metrics number one. But I'm almost viewing it as the lagging indicator. And at the end, that eighth mark of how all that stuff builds up into it. Because I feel like what I heard from Francie, Sarah, and Fran was, and what you just alluded to there, there's different phases to your business. So if from the start you're focused on the financial metrics and you're not reinvesting into your business, or like Sarah said, offloading some of the key tasks to grow your business in certain ways, you're not going to actually get to that end state that Fran's talking about, because you're just going to fail out. So I think for me, as the lagging indicator, what's your goal now? What's it in 10 years? I think coming to the financial advisor world, there's some solo advisors that do this as a lifestyle practice. They don't necessarily need to maximize their financial metrics around it. They may need to focus on some of the other levers to have that customer satisfaction or grow their practice to a sustainable way to let them live the life they want. But if they are in the phase where they're trying to sell their book or maximize their exit value, I think that's where the financial metrics get a lot more important. And that's where we look to get leaner. So that's bringing in people like yourself or Fran from how are we transitioning now to getting my butt out of the seat, turning from the CEO and letting others carry it through. But I just think that that's the hardest balance, I think, in being a business owner from the start, is you need to have revenue and you need to be profitable to keep this thing alive. That would be my perspective of all of those other seven really lead up into this lagging indicator. That's probably the most important if you are looking to exit.
I see a lot of times, particularly with startups, they're lean because they have to be lean, but sometimes there's a risk factor there where if you're not willing to invest enough to really get it up and going, then you're never going to quite get there the way you want to. And so it's always a delicate balance with all of this. The other aspect of financial performance is having a good set of books. I find a lot of times we do our own books or we have a bookkeeper, but we often haven't really spent the time really getting the level of help so that we've really got the financials dialed in. Things are being allocated properly. They're being analyzed and evaluated, because a lot of times those numbers are just numbers. I mean, we might look at our P&L or we might look at our balance statement, but we really don't have the expertise to dive in and analyze things. And because of that, I think there are a lot of opportunities and maybe even income that is being left on the table. And our books are a little sloppy. We maybe take a lot of perks. A lot of business owners take perks. So I just kind of interested in your experience, what you've experienced or things you'd like to add.
Well, I'll jump in. So if you don't know your numbers, it is almost like getting in the car, setting the GPS, and ignoring all the directions. You're not going to end up where you want to go. So are more than something that you use to prop the door open. They're more than dust collectors, and even if they're electronic. So those numbers are for outsiders, whether it's your banker or your lawyer or your accountant or your insurance broker. If you're going to get a line of credit or a loan, those numbers are talking when you're not. So if you don't know them, they're telling a story. And those three financial statements tell different perspectives. So it's like someone has three sets of eyes into your business and they talk about what's happening right now with the balance sheet. They talk about in terms of what you own and what you owe. They talk about the money that's come in and gone out, that income and expenses. And then the cash flow talks about your ability to pay. So, Dave, when you mentioned earlier profits first, a lot of people are glad that their books say, I'm profitable. And again, the person that says, I make $1 million in revenue. When I was younger and dating, sometimes guys would say, well, I've got $1 million business. And I'm like, you're going to buy me a soda or you're going to buy me a steak? I don't care. What I actually want to know is what's your bottom line? And I generally found that guys didn't think that was very attractive, so I stopped doing that. But the fact of the matter is, top line revenue doesn't matter. But again, understanding your financial statements and how they tell a story, whether or not you're talking, and the fact that if you're going to use a bookkeeper, you still might want to invest in working with a person. Maybe it's an accountant, maybe it's a CPA. It depends on what you can afford, but someone who you can have conversations with about those statements and how you as a business owner can use them to make better decisions. So they do, in fact, act like kind of a future map, past map, because it's what you've done, but you can use those same three statements to do forecasts to guide you to where you want to go. So many people miss the fact that bragging rights and financial statements, if there's a gap, that's a problem. People call you a liar.
What I heard from you and what I heard from Fran is very interesting, where I think you alluded to that story of you need to offload to grow, like we talked about before, but it's also depending on people to actually use that time wisely. And from Fran's perspective, it's using that information that you're offloading and getting expertise on wisely. So if you don't use both of those, the information and the time wisely, you're just spending more and potentially not increasing your revenue. So that's maybe a plug for a lot of us on this call, either coaches or people that can help, is if you offload to the expert, how are you actually keeping that person accountable, giving them good ideas and putting those things into practice in the business to increase revenue and increase the overall business in a way that if you just start offloading stuff and let people do it, like Fran alluded to, of, yeah, I got a person for my books, they just do it, but you don't actually talk about how do I optimize this or what are some things we can make better from here. You're not really getting the best bang for your buck.
You're only getting partial benefit. Yeah.
Yep. That's why I wanted to connect those dots.
So it's not just about a matter of having good books, but it's actually being able to analyze and evaluate the content that's there so that you then can do the projections like Ryan's talked about. And you're really getting the full benefit from having those books as you project ahead and you try to grow your business. And I think a lot of people in business, they're not thinking beyond just the basics. And because of that, often they're really missing out and probably are leaving a lot of money on the table that they could be making just by being more proactive in that way.
I think one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about is KPIs. So key performance indicators. And what's cool about KPIs is they can be like as creative as you want to be. It could be something like a retention of an employee, or it could be a ratio of two numbers. Retention's a big thing for us, but I think it's also really focused on what has a relationship to where you want to go. And so that can be a really valuable way to simplify the goal and simplify the future and where you want to go. Having all these different ways to view the business as a way that you can work towards. And so then you have this whole idea of that which gets measured gets done. Yes. And I think that that is a really valuable way to organize a view.
Yep. The nice thing about KPI is you really can have KPIs in virtually every area. It can be in sales, it can be in the financials, but it takes a little work to get them there and to really get them functioning accurately. The other thing is taking the time to analyze and take action on what you learn. And maybe that's where we tend to fall down the most. Well, let me just simply say I appreciate everybody being here today. I hope this has been helpful. I hope that this has been beneficial to you today as you think about your own business or practice and as you think about helping clients that you're working with. So thanks so much for being with me and wish you well.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank
Nice
you.
to
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dave.
Dave.
Yeah, this is great. Bringing us all together. Thank you.
Yeah.